Hello everyone, welcome back. I have a lot of things going on right now, so I'm sorry if you hear my book down here. I have some notes because I wanted this to be a little bit more structured, but today the book we're going to be talking about is The Witcher by this guy. Because I'm not even gonna start, okay? This is a compilation of short stories, so it is a lot different than things that I'm used to reading. As you can see behind me, I have a lot of epic fantasy that doesn't really take a pause in between each chapter to tell different parts of the story in the same way that this compilation of short stories does. So I found that The Witcher was different in a positive way for me. I had been reading John Gwynne, so I just started Ruin after this book, which is why it's not up here. I had just finished Valor when I started this book, and then just now started Ruin. Okay, so it was nice to get battle scenes that were pretty short and still done in an effective way to where it was still very enjoyable to read and still very entertaining, but not go on for a long time about battles and have a lot of things going on mentally during the battles as well. It's just kind of like things happen, battle happens, there are some thoughts, more thoughts after the battle ends, and so on and so forth, if that makes any sense. This is also my first translated novel. I'm not going to count manga, and I'm not going to count the Bible. But other than that, this is my first fiction novel that is translated. This was originally in Polish. If you guys do not know, I feel like most of, at least this part of BookTube, YouTube, whatever, knows that this is originally a Polish work. So there is a lot of controversy on if you should even bother reading it in English. I heard that the Spanish translations were good, and then I also heard the Spanish translations were bad, and I'm just like, what is going on here? Because I was like, oh, I'm majoring in Spanish, maybe I should try to read it in Spanish, but the copies are so difficult to find here in the United States, so I'm just going to read them in English, and I'm going to read them by Orbit, which I heard is the better of the publishing when it comes to their translators. Were better working this one out. So a lot of people worry about the prose. Firstly, I do want to say that this took me a month to read, and it really shouldn't have, because it's maybe not even 300 pages, not counting the extras, of course. It is really not that long. I just realized I'm stain on my shirt. Yeah, 319 pages. Anyway, sorry, rereading the end because there was a cliffhanger, which I wasn't expecting there to be a cliffhanger. I don't know why, but I just wasn't. Maybe just because most of the stories within themselves were semi-completed. Well, that's it. Some of them. Maybe, yeah, there's a lot going on in this book, okay? And I did want to talk about, because it took me a month to read, kind of my journey in reading so far, at least what I'm realizing with this book and Valor by John Gwynne, is that I've been taking way too much time to read. I know that there's a lot of people on this platform who just want to read and read so fast that, it's like, why are you even reading if you're not taking your time to enjoy it? I'm not a skim reader. I really like to take my time and really ingest the story. But I found that probably, now here's my theory. My theory, and if you have learned languages, please let me know if you have done this as well. But because I am used to now reading Spanish, and kind of before, I'm getting better at it now as I'm progressing and getting to more advanced classes, there was a work of translating in my brain every time I looked at the words. And I started kind of doing that in English as well, where I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, let me try to picture everything that is being said and make sure I know the definition of everything that is being said, so I'm getting the full picture and getting the full story. And that is just a headache. That doesn't sound like a fun time. I'm just supposed to be sitting here enjoying my books and reading and enjoying the story. And no author, I don't think, at least no author that I want to read books from, I guess, wants you to sit on every word like that, because that is just a headache. That is for the author to do, I feel like that, or a publisher or an editor or something like that to do. It is not my job to be reading something like that. So all that being said, I've had all these thoughts in my head of, why am I taking so long to read? And a couple different theories is, like what I just said, I don't want to miss anything. Or maybe I feel like I can give thoughtful reviews if I take more time or make sure that I'm getting everything. And then, later be able to talk spoilers with people and feel like I'm contributing to the conversation. But what is happening is that I am just taking a super long time and it's not getting me anywhere necessarily. Like I don't think I'm getting more out of it by doing what I'm doing. I think I'm honestly like hurting my own journey in reading. So if you guys have related to that, maybe it has something to do with my OCD too, where I feel like everything needs to be perfect. I need to be able to understand everything to feel like I've read the book, or I need to feel like I've sat on every word to feel like I've read the book. And I don't think that way about other people. Like, why am I holding myself to this standard? Like, I'm not going to remember what position Geralt was in when he was fighting said monster and which side of the mountain he was on or which side of the cottage he was on. Like, nobody's gonna care, okay? Like I said, that's for the editor to do, not for me. So let's talk about how this book starts after my kind of caveat into reading, but I feel like it all kind of comes together. So don't y'all start. Duchess. My cats are fighting each other, which I feel like always has to happen when I'm filming for some reason. I am using my hands a lot. I'm sorry. Okay. How it starts is there's an intimate scene between Geralt and a nymph of sorts. And I found that a very interesting way to start out your story, and I didn't really understand, and I feel like I still don't really understand why that was chosen to be the grabber, the beginning of the story. Because the relationship that he has with this person is talked about later in the other short stories in this book, but the first one doesn't really offer much other than an intimate scene. However, it's not graphic, so it doesn't really make me uncomfortable per se. I'm not going to say that I want to sit there and read that, but because that's just not my preference. But what I think is interesting about it is that, one, it is not graphic, and I don't know if things get more graphic later in the series and in the main books in the series, but it was not too graphic for me. But everybody has their way to measure that for themselves, so definitely take that with a grain of salt, like however, whatever. Okay. And I feel like it was more romanticized, which I found was really interesting, and I'll get into it a little bit more about Geralt and his character, but to romanticize something like that for a witcher, not necessarily a man, a guy who you don't even know if he can feel love and feel the aspects of romance like normal humans do because of the transformation he's been through. So yeah, we don't even know the depth to his emotions or anything like that. And I actually found that pretty interesting as I was sitting there taking notes and thinking, okay, it's actually interesting that Geralt, although perceived to be a womanizer by a lot, it's because he really doesn't have feelings necessarily as normal people do. And yeah, you could make this an excuse for any book for anybody, right? But I don't feel like it was done in a way that was offensive to women, in my personal opinion, in my experience in reading this book. So I did want to talk about the battles, the mystery, the stories, and even the fairy tales. So the battles and the battle scenes or fights, I guess you could say, they were written well. Like, they were easy to follow, and not only easy to follow, but also interesting, which I definitely value in a story, is to have interesting battle scenes. I feel like John Gwynne is definitely teaching me a lot about how to make a battle interesting, and can I really see it in my brain? And I feel like this book, you can see almost everything in your brain, except for the monsters and herbs that I have no idea where they're coming from. I have no idea what their names are. Like, I don't know where he's getting all this stuff from. I think the mystery is interesting because there are, like I said, some short stories that are not completed, and you kind of go past and present sort of situation, which I really enjoy in my stories. I found that out about myself, that I really like reading stories that kind of are in the present and then tell you something about the past when it's relevant, and I feel like he did this really well. And I think that it was really interesting that there were fairy tales in this, like, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty. I don't think Sleeping Beauty was in here. Beauty and the Beast, maybe? I don't know. Like, there was different, fairy tales that we're all used to. But I don't know how prevalent it was in Poland at the time. Like, I don't know what these had to do with the story, but they almost felt like they were just kind of put in there just to be there and just to maybe recognize the stories or try to have some sort of, thing that people can relate to. I don't know. It was just kind of something to look at and chuckle when I did read those sort of things. I'm like, the 7 dwarves she was with, or gnomes, or whatever, and that, like I said, I feel like it was kind of out of place for me, but maybe that is something that goes into the prose that makes more sense in Polish, or maybe it's completely different stories that are made to make a little bit more sense for English readers, but I don't know the original language of a lot of fairy tales, and I'm sure that there are varying types of fairy tales that are similar in different languages and different cultures. So I have no idea. I don't know. I liked a lot of the women in this book, actually. So I was a little bit scared to go on The Witcher because I watched literally the first episode of the show and could not continue because of the nudity, because of the intimate scenes. I felt like it was more graphic, but I guess it's more graphic when you're seeing it versus if you're reading it, depending on how it's written, of course, and depending on how it's shown in a show. But like I said, I was scared to get into The Witcher because I thought that it would be a lot of graphic, intimate moments. I don't really care about graphic violence as much. I feel like if you're a fantasy reader, then you're a little bit more predisposed to that, and it's there. I feel like I grew up watching a lot of films that had violence in them, though watching it is a little bit harder than reading it, I think. So the other thing that concerned me was I thought that the author would come off as a womanizer as well because of Geralt. And honestly, it didn't come off that way. And although there were definitely womanizer characters within the book, they weren't treated as, oh, you're doing a good thing by doing these things with women. It's just kind of like, oh, that is a human experience, I guess, and also a Witcher experience to some degree. I feel like Geralt still has more emotion and more depth to him than what other people may be doing it for. I don't know. Like I said, this is the first one I've read. This is the only experience I've had with Geralt of Rivia. The only experience I've had with The Witcher, okay? So that is what I'm taking from this book myself. I think that the friends and the monsters that we meet along the way are really fun to read about. I thought it was really interesting to learn about different types of monsters, and it kind of felt like reading D&D and video game stuff without the role-playing elements, so I wouldn't call it an RPG, but I guess a lot of the video games are based off but you know what I'm saying, right? Like, I hope that makes sense. Defining monsters in the way that it was done kind of felt like, it was adapted into a video game, so it was basically perfectly. That I feel like The Witcher is perfect as a video game, but I know that they follow different storylines. Okay, there is a theme that a lot of people talk about when they talk about The Witcher, and it's one of the things that actually brought me to really want to read The Witcher, and it was that Geralt is supposed to fight the monsters, but you find out that the people who pay him, they are worse than the monsters. I found that really interesting. However, if that would not have been pointed out to me, I don't think I would have pulled it out of the story because I don't feel like that theme is as prevalent in this book. So if you disagree with me, please let me know because I would love to hear your takes on it. Please talk full spoilers about The Last Wish in the comments, but just make sure to have, in the topic that it's spoiler. Okay, so in my opinion, even though I took a month to read this, I tried to really focus on what was happening and try to remember. I feel like there were a lot of forgettable stories within The Witcher, but while I'm reading them, I was very interested in them. There's actually some politics, which I really enjoy politics and fantasy, but it's only like 1 or 2 of the stories that have heavier political themes, which I found interesting. And some of those stick out a little bit more to me than some of the others, which my husband and I would talk about it because we were kind of buddy reading this together. I'll fix that. Don't worry about what's happening over there. But yeah, so he would have to kind of spark my memory, and then I would remember and be like, oh yeah, this is what happened in this and this and this. But just kind of with the act of recall of this story was really difficult for a good bit of the book, I'd say. And maybe that's just because the questions my husband was asking was just a little bit confusing for me. I don't know. This is not a confusing story. I think that my memory is just not great. And so there are some things that are forgettable, but there are some things that are really unforgettable in this book as well. So I want to say that overall, my opinion of this book is good. It's not great, but it's good. And I could not tell you what my rating is right now. I finished this book 2 days ago, and I still haven't come up with a rating. However, if you want to know kind of a range, I'm thinking between a 4 and a 4.25. But there were just some things that I just felt like it doesn't reach the 4.5 to 5-star range for me, because it's not going to be, it's not that impactful in my opinion. It wasn't as realized because it's short stories. So that's the other thing too, is that it's out of my comfort zone in the way that it's told. So maybe that also affects my rating as well. I don't know. So let me know if you have read The Witcher, if you like The Witcher, if you've read the whole series, if you've read this book, if you haven't read this book, if you're thinking about reading the book, let me know. Let me know everything. I appreciate you being here. God bless.
Oh my gosh, she's gorgeous.